straight out of UCLA, where I came out with a fine arts degree. Analog art was becoming digital. We used Skype. Back then, AOL was my first job, my first tech job. You remember that? You've got mail. Resetting VIP accounts for all the celebrities that had free AOL accounts because of all of their brand and channel strategy. They had a great brand strategy, and they're gone now, so I can speak freely. We were like in this kind of sweatshop call center, massive, huge room, where there were about 1,000 employees, and we'd work all through the night, 24-hour shifts. Now that I'm in the farm sector, I'm the CE at Farm Focus. We've been around for 40 years. We help farmers manage $9 billion in income. Farming is an example of the type of lifestyle management and planning that you would definitely build into the way you build wealth and the way you actually think about assets. Farmers are amazing entrepreneurs. They wear a lot of hats and they think on their feet, they pivot quickly. Ultimately, they're in it for the long-term journey of what the farm and the asset means for the family, what it means for the generations, but importantly, what it means for the community. Well, I love the topic of lifestyle and wealth. As you know, we've riffed on that a few times before. Sure. Particularly though, now that I'm in the farm sector, and this is great that we're here to catch up because we haven't had a lot of time together in the last year or so. But I'm the CE at Farm Focus, which is now, I like to say, the hottest new startup in the sector. Right. We've been around for 40 years. We help farmers manage $9 billion in income. But farming is an example of the type of lifestyle management and planning that you would definitely build into the way you build wealth and the way you actually think about assets. Farmers are amazing entrepreneurs. They wear a lot of hats and they think on their feet, they pivot quickly, but ultimately they're in it for the long-term journey of what the farm and the asset means for the family. What it means for the generations, but importantly, more and more as the next generation of farmers are coming through, what it means for the community and all of the third-party stakeholders. Some people call it the triple bottom line, the environment. So I'm loving the farm sector. It's really exciting, having come from, I think just built and helped Forsyth Barr launch Tempo. So financial services is definitely the common theme in my life. Although ironically, I did not start there. So you want me to tell a little bit of my story?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So I, straight out of UCLA, where I came out with a fine arts degree, right at the time, and this dates me for sure, of when analog art was becoming digital. So I still remember, for example, sending my first email, setting up my first invitation-only Gmail account. We used Skype. Back then, AOL was my first job, my first tech job. I don't know how many people, listening or watching you remember that You've Got Mail sound.
Yes. Yes.
And my first tech job was actually resetting VIP accounts for all the celebrities that had free AOL accounts because of all of their brand and channel strategy. They had a great brand strategy. I mean, it was like Meg Ryan and was it Tom Hanks in that Sleepless in Seattle movie? Yeah, so it was like literally part of American culture, this AOL company. Meanwhile, the reality, and they're gone now, so I can speak freely, was that we were like in this kind of sweatshop call center, massive, huge room where I think there were about 1,000 employees, and we'd work all through the night, 24-hour shifts. We weren't 24 hours, but they had a rotation. And I was on VIP password reset was my job.
Oh my gosh.
And literally I had to do the job in 30 seconds or less. Otherwise, like my call stats would get out of balance. I quickly worked out the system and I improved it, and I actually had like celebrities really excited to talk to us and like would, upsell something else. And so it was really fun to know that, okay, there's this overlap between personal relationships and that human connection and, speed and performance and the technology to reset the password real quick. That was just a tiny little first foray. My probably more exciting tech first start was with lynda.com, which was one of the biggest ed tech unicorns. It sold in 2016 to LinkedIn Learning, it became, for 1.5 or 6 billion US. all founded in Ojai, California, my hometown where I went to high school. Linda Weinman's still a very dear friend of mine. I was one of the first 10 employees at the company. And we also went through that analog to digital transition together. I was an intern that shrink wrapped DVDs. That was my official job. I don't know, shrink wrapping, do you know what that is?
Yeah.
And I quickly, in 1 month, started interning and shrink wrapping, and then I took over the production experiment, which was taking these wonderful books that Linda's known for. Some people call her the mother of the internet. She wrote one of the first great books on designing web graphics. It's a real classic title if you haven't heard of it, but it was, back then we called it WYSIWYG. It was what you see is what you get. All the Dreamweaver, all the fireworks, all the Flash, animation, vector tools that had just launched from Adobe, Macromedia, this really dates me. All of that was fresh and emergent, and Linda got her start as an After Effects special effects specialist who taught at Art Center. She worked on the Star Wars franchise. She did all of the special effects manually first, like literally the galaxy scenes where you see lots of black and lots of little bright stars. She did that on cardboard with like pinpricks.
Wow.
Then she did it in After Effects, the first version. And so she became instantly, almost like over a period of a couple of years, like the worldwide expert on designing web graphics and animation and special effects. And so she had this whole training program. Sorry, this is kind of a long story, but it's probably worth sharing.
Yeah.
She had this whole training program where all the corporate companies of the United States and overseas would send their design teams out to Ojai, and they'd get like in-depth seminar training on fireworks, or how to create that like little motion or graphic on page. Flash was a big one. She was really well known for Flash, and over time she couldn't handle all of the teaching herself, so we recruited a library of teachers. Then 9/11 hit, and overnight all bookings were canceled. No travel, no expense, no budget, no one had training. So she had to pivot on a dime, and meanwhile, intern Auriga shrink wrapping DVDs downstairs, went upstairs to take over the production department, which at that point was kind of an experiment. They'd filmed a couple of the training classes. They were selling some of them on VHS, which is what I was shrink wrapping, and then it moved to DVD. But it wasn't web, it wasn't streamed online, it wasn't a subscription. This is like before SaaS was a thing. And so, we created these videos that we started putting into a website. That's what Linda teaches, so why not eat her own dog food and make her own website that hosts streaming video content? And I was with her on that whole journey where production, by the time I left, was 500 employees and had multiple headquarters. And then, of course, LinkedIn Learning bought it, and then it suddenly had lots of production teams. But they're still going strong. You kind of see like these masterclass, awesome little prompts in LinkedIn as you, evolve your subscription and your type of persona with LinkedIn. A lot of people are on there as an author or a recruiter, and they'll serve up content based on where you're going and what your career path is. So it's kind of similar, actually, just to bring it back to wealth. Like in farming and in personal wealth, management, I'm not an advisor, so that's my disclaimer. But you always have to know where you're going and what your strategy is and what you want. And as a product technical professional, you always have a roadmap, and you're always planning for outcomes and what that North Star is. And you have options to get there, and you'll sometimes want to test those options and make sure it's working. So in terms of wealth management, really designing your life for what you want, I like to call it, living life by design, is really important, particularly when you don't have like some of those traditional stepping stones. Like when you go to university and you decide, I want to be a lawyer, there's a very particular path. With AI coming out, that's all different.
Yeah.
A lot of people are saying, jobs of the future, we have no idea what they are right now. Like my daughters are probably going to do something that I've never heard of, in 10 years. So it's an exciting time to even be more confident about what you want from life and design it and structure it around that wealth accumulation, and really thinking about, diverse strategies to get there. Yeah, I can talk on this topic for a long time, but I definitely don't want to hog all of the the sound waves here.
No, that's why you're here, right? So where do you think your foundation came from in terms of your mindset? Like, is it something that you've learned from your family or something from your, wider circle of friends?
I love that question. That's a good one. All things, I would think. My family is a big part of my life. I really believe in, I'm such a tech nerd and I'm constantly hunched over, computers and looking at a glowing screen that I have to have a very opposite home life and personal life. So my husband is a big part of my yin and yang balance in life. He built our house, with his bare hands. It's an off-grid eco home.
That's cool.
We don't even get a signal inside.
Oh, wow.
So when I'm at home, it's like my sanctuary and I just unplug, digital detox. And that's really important to me. So that outdoor life, that nature influence is really important. But when it comes to like leading teams and building new products, I think it really is that creative mindset that I was trained in at UCLA and fine arts, like really being able to stare at a blank canvas, whatever, that means hypothetically that means, product doesn't exist. You're writing a brief, you're getting, runway and funding lined up, you're convincing a board to innovate. It's really fun for me to do that, be that catalyst for potential. And it's funny, we're in potentia.
True.
But you have to be able to measure what the impact or that outcome, again, thinking about that product journey and customer journey. If you're designing a roadmap, you need to think about, okay, what is the North Star and describe it. With a creative mindset, using the right side of your brain, you can actually really vividly describe that, and you can be very influential and get people excited about something that doesn't exist. There's no code, there's no brand, there's no logo yet, but it's really important to be able to tell that story and build that kind of momentum. So I really believe it's all about creativity at the end of the day, and being able to take a challenge or a problem and make it an amazing opportunity. And that's what I love doing. And I love especially seeing that happen with others. Like Charlie and I have spent a few years talking now, and I love watching Charlie, grow his business and realize potential. And, I was just at KPMG today helping, the partners there understand what digital product strategy looks like. And so I have a wide, diverse portfolio of coaching, actually, and helping people understand that time of catalyzing and what that could mean for them in their context. So yeah, that was a roundabout answer.
No, but a good one. You mentioned you are big on designing your own life. So how have you gone about that for you and your family?
Yeah, well, definitely the nature and the yin and yang balance is very important to me. My daughters are a big part of my life, as you can imagine. I'm really proud of being a mother and a working CEO. I think it's really important to have that realistic view of what it's like to manage, a lot of momentum and pushing boundaries professionally, but also be home and be present as a parent. Like, there's nothing to be ashamed of about that. So I really kind of advertise and talk about that a lot with my teams. Like, parenting teaches you everything you need to know about business.
Yeah.
If you can manage a tantrum at home, you can handle anything at work.
Yeah.
But designing for that relaxation is really important, and that energy and sort of rebalancing and recharging. And so nature is a big part of our life. I spend all of my paycheck, the stuff I'm not saving and putting aside for wealth management. But we mountain bike. The girls both do downhill mountain biking, and Capella, my eldest, is actually training for racing overseas. And Kiwi girls in particular are actually getting quite a reputation globally for being amazing mountain bikers. The Junior World Cup has 1, 2, 3 podium Kiwi girls on it, pretty much a couple years in a row now. So she's on that trajectory, and that means we all are. Yeah. It's a big undertaking, lots of bank of mom and dad.
Yeah.
And like her bike is this amazing specimen. And yeah, talk about also pushing the boundaries of comfort levels. Watching as a parent your little girl bounce down the mountain is pretty terrifying.
Yeah, waiting for the broken
Totally.
arms and the missing teeth and the
Yeah.
broken ribs.
It's full on, but she loves it. She's realizing her potential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what was it? So how did you get into Farm Focus?
Yeah, that's a good one. I have been there, it's still new, 7 months in the CE role, almost 8 months now. But it was actually my first job in New Zealand when I first moved here. I was with lynda.com until 2016. That was my first job in New Zealand. And I moved here in 2008. I've been here about 18 years, believe it or not.
Wow.
My American accent is still going strong. But I hadn't worked in the sector or in technology or any leadership roles yet. So I took this job at it was called Cash Manager Rural back then. And I was the one that kicked off the digital transformation. So we were outsourcing development, kind of all the same usual Phoenix project scenarios there. And I helped them build a digital product in the web and created the team. And so I did a bunch of digital transformation, and we built a product innovation team, and I helped then Brian Eccles, the owner, founder, understand what it was like to organize around, managing a digital product. And it was a big job. I was there for 3 years, and it was time for me to go explore something else. And I did a little tiny foray in managing a gallery and having a
fine arts
business
degree.
in Martinborough, which was very fulfilling. Lots of workshops. I basically wanted something for me to get that fulfillment on weekends, so I built it. But yeah, it was an amazing opportunity to create a little bit of step change in the Wairarapa and in Masterton, where they're on a lot of tech companies. So it's been a pleasure to come back to the team and actually kind of pick up where I left off in some ways, and also really focus on that full potential and, helping farmers realize, the lifestyle they want and help them grow their asset and think about the next generation and plan that longer term journey is really exciting and fulfilling, fun work.
Okay, so you're obviously very successful at what you do. So how do you make the balance work? So I am this myth of supermum, right? I think it sets us all up to fail.
Yes, it does.
So how do you balance it out?
It's not easy, and I'm not successful all the time at all. And there are times when the girls are, pretty pissed off at me because I'm too busy. This weekend I'm going to a conference. But they also know how important it is to me to fulfill and make that, mark. And so I try and include them in my thinking, always.
Okay.
Transparency. I rely heavily on my husband stepping in. So he's our domestic partner and caretaker, and he has to do the dishes sometimes after a long day. The girls are learning to contribute. So, much like a cross-functional team, and you kind of share those responsibilities and you share the risks and the load, you have to design for that in your family. That said, it's nice to have a mother home and tucking you in at night. And sometimes biologically that's just super important. Yeah. And so I try and be present, especially at bedtime. That's the biggest thing. Have that little bit of time where you just catch up on the day and you talk about what was fun, what's tomorrow, what's happening, and just let them talk. Especially teenagers can be like, all the things in 30 seconds.
Yeah. So how do you look after yourself then?
Oh, that's a good question. Because super moms deprioritize themselves. I think living life by design, making sure that we're always making progress to, having a second home one day, making sure that I'm taking that holiday and that we've got enough set aside for the holiday. Having those milestones, I'm very goal driven, so having that thing to look forward to is really important. And I usually have something every quarter like that. Working out is a big one. I never thought we'd be talking about working out on this podcast. But making sure, and I do not do that enough, and I can tell when I'm out of balance, it's because I've not worked out in a while. My husband built us a gym, and we have a gym on our property that I never use. And so that is, always weighing on me, and I want to get into that gym more often, but I have to be honest with myself, socially, I need that social pressure, and I need that commitment and that obligation, so I end up going to the gym in town. Because I've signed up, and it's tech. It's an app that I can just sign up for on my phone. So those little tiny hacks are important. You need to recognize that, I'm not going to go to the gym if I have to schedule it for myself. Yep. I'll go to the gym though if I pay money. I make that commitment, then I'm accountable, and I show up. So I've noticed that actually with finance, when you make that commitment and you allow your customer to have agency to take that choice and to step in and say, yes, I want this, they value it more. So that's a really important principle that I bring into a lot of the stuff I do.
Okay.
It's also about, like you mentioned, by design and where you want to go. And then I think also, which I think there are plenty of places that have helped with this, Dave Ramsey being one in the US, would be knowing where you're at now, which is often the hardest bit.
Yeah.
Is knowing what your baseline is now. We had someone on the podcast talk about it, and it's something that we're kind of solving internally at the moment for users, is actually a pathway for them to understand where they're at and where they're currently where the trajectory is going.
Totally.
And then from there you have an easier time making decisions.
Yeah.
Because you know what the inputs are to get the desired or close to the desired outcome. Because at the end of the day, these forecasts, like any business forecast, especially in the startup land, are often wrong.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue and topic, because triangulating to know where you are is always important in life. I mean, even Capella riding down the mountain, she's always looking at the track. She's looking at what's coming up ahead, what her response is going to be, and what she did last time, and how she's not going to repeat, Similarly, in business, you learn a lot from your mistakes, particularly when you're building something new that's never existed. It's all about leaning into the risk and the uncertainty quickly so you can find out as much as you can. With finance, you need to know where you're going, but you also need to have options and responses. And so with Farm Focus, we have optionality built in to where you have a budget and you have a plan, but that plan will inevitably change as you learn more, right? So that budget has to adjust, but having a real-time position of where you're at is really important, because especially with farming, these incredible entrepreneurs that I mentioned at the start, are constantly making decisions in the paddock, every day. When they order the feed budget, at Wrightson's, that feed amount of expenditure has a big impact on their cash flow, and they have to make sure it's timed carefully with the wool payout, which is almost zero right now, actually. Sheep and beef farmers are really having to look at their margins closely for the first time in a few decades, actually. So they're making a lot of diversification on farm and, planting crops for the first time, or even looking at dairying, or having a side hustle like an Airbnb or honey business. And these are all things that a good entrepreneur is constantly thinking about, but you don't necessarily know you need to make a change until you see the signals. You see the roots in the path and the trail that could send you off. And having knowledge is always power. Linda used to always say that when you're in continuous education, you're constantly learning and you're curious about everything, and something that feels uncomfortable or uncertain or mysterious is where you need to focus. And so getting more certainty is what you're always building into your planning. And farmers are great at doing that. They've got contingency plans and contingency plans on top of contingency plans. It's pretty cool, actually. And they've been doing it for decades, too. That's what I love about farming. It's got such history. I mean, even the stock exchange, right? It's all about livestock trading.
Here in New Zealand.
Well, just the concept of the stock exchange.
Right, I see, yeah.
So I don't know, I probably didn't answer your question.
No, I think it was good.
You'll always get a creative story when you ask me a question.
This is why we built the podcast. It's conversations like we had here in the room when we met that really shaped the vision for the podcast, and hearing people's stories, because that's what other people can relate to.
Yeah.
Is knowing that someone else has been through it. And that's kind of the story of life, right? Is everyone's actually been through, I guess, quite different experiences, but actually quite similar in a sense too. Obviously, with technology always moving, and especially in this day and age, you can feel like people haven't been through similar experiences before us, but they have. It's just different form factors, and but always a similar time frame.
Yeah. Well, that actually is another segue to AI and what I think that's doing for humanity. It's an amazing opportunity. It's still early days, so it's quite up and down volatility, but the more the easy stuff, the black and white kind of predictable stuff gets automated, the more focus we now have on our humanity. And I love that part about AI because we will then lean into soft skills and human connection and trust, and like how to measure that is going to make such a difference to progress. And you know, AI will do all of the drudgery, kind of black and white easy stuff that's predictable and, you know, formulaic, and that means we have more time to not be siloed away from each other and to actually have the right conversations at the right time. And yeah, I know that's a big topic. That's probably another podcast.
That's a long topic. There's a lot of places you can go there. I think, you know, yeah, it's becoming more acute now that there are kind of people behind decisions and people behind kind of the things that seemingly are big beasts of businesses or government or anything like that. But ultimately, yeah, there's typically a decision maker or many where then you might find that there's inertia. But I think, yeah, like what we're finding from AI is, you know, I've always talked about it as an augmentation experience of, you know, how you can basically improve productivity. I think about pretty much everything in life for me, it's about like how much did I get out of an input, whether that's capital, time or whatever, computation. And, you know, now more than ever, a small team of highly motivated, connected people can have extraordinary outcomes.
That's right.
And
even commercial outcomes. Have you heard about the latest startup that got to 100 million in revenue in 18 months?
no.
It's just been in the headlines this week.
Where?
Was it Wiz? I'm trying to remember what the exact company name is in the States.
Yeah, I think I've heard of them.
But full AI platform, and it's a very small team, and yeah, they're just blowing all records out of the water because they're not reinventing any wheels. They're taking a lot of off-the-shelf capability and code and technology.
Well, you saw that kind of with crypto as well. Although a lot of the kind of valuations were kind of obscure in a sense.
Well, they were inflated. Valuations in Silicon Valley have been kind of a challenge for a while. Like, you know, even starting back to lynda.com and the sale to LinkedIn, you know, it was only sold for 1.5 billion US, which sounds amazing and huge. But actually, if you take the similar type of company profile 5 years later, and you've got companies like Figma selling for $40 billion, and nobody even knows what Figma is, you know? We tech nerds do. But a lot of the world would have no clue. And why would it be a $40 billion business? Anyway.
Yeah, true. I mean, but what we're seeing is, you can get greater scale with less people. And less capital, actually, in some cases. It depends on, obviously, the nuances of the industry and how regulated it is. But it's cool to see that...
you can focus on value creation, not, you know, sort of the steps to get there, the implementation as such. That it's a little bit faster.
And the kind of, I've thought about this a bit, and the potential impact for large software companies like Salesforce now that have a real kind of risk that is emerging and present in their business. And you see that people are going out and potentially, especially in an environment now where people are like, well, I don't want expenditure and I'm very cautious about what the ramp up of my expense is going to be in any of these services. And now they're being challenged because a small team can build something that isn't the full suite and doesn't have the ecosystem of one of these large SaaS companies, but it may solve a specific problem for a number of businesses in a niche way. Or an internal team like us could build something that we might consume previously from a SaaS company, but we might develop it in-house at a fraction of the cost and then not have that ongoing expense.
That's right. Yeah, the overhead and expenditure. Again, back to wealth management, you know, living life by design as a founder and as a company creator means you're making really good choices and designing your business and your roadmap with the right intention. And that doesn't always mean big bang, massive unicorn, you know, hundreds of millions of borrowed capital. Those days are hopefully over.
I think it's cool. I think it's refreshing.
Yeah.
I prefer this environment. I think it's like a more interesting and kind of less known environment as well. I think that the playbook when there's a playbook for a long period of time, it potentially gets overdone.
Yeah.
And then when you get a change in environment, you do get a reset, and that also means that the rules of the game change.
That's right. Yeah.
And now we're in an environment where unit economics matter. How you distribute your product matters. If you think about just a few years ago, even to today, the Mag 7 are getting at least 40 cents of every dollar that a startup raises. And they've been benefiting from that for many, many years. And now with podcasts and other mediums, you can actually go and you don't need to necessarily pay for ads to get eyeballs. You can leverage content that's valuable and it will hopefully get better distribution. If you look at something like George Foreman, for example, or more modern would be maybe Prime, which the YouTubers Logan Paul and KSI made. I mean, I don't think the drink's great.
No.
But
Or Kodak. I mean, that's the ultimate innovation story and disruption. Like, they didn't want to take the step to disrupt themselves, and
true.
Yeah.
Yes, because in the short term, you're basically cannibalizing your market. I mean, that was the interesting thing about the Figma acquisition. Actually, was the fact that Adobe were willing to do it.
You've got to
go for it.
I mean, if you're a big corporate like that, you've got to think outside the box and be willing to take risk, to evolve and change your profile and the way you operate.
True.
And again, optionality, right? You need to de-risk all eggs in one basket. That said, though, there's something interesting around really focusing on your core and what you do really well, and that's where I think that uncertainty comes in. AI can replicate what you do well and those common known pathways, but there's also something to protecting your business and making sure that your core is well managed. And if you get back into financial management and wealth and advice, again, I'm not an advisor, but really having that anchor in your assets, something that you can always depend on and rely on, is really healthy. And I feel like that's where kind of this inflection moment is for society. Anyone who's building towards something, really protecting that kind of common and consistent and reliable path is very important. And then you can take risk on top of that.
Yeah.
And it applies to everything, right?
Yeah,
Technology, money.
Yeah, I think like diversification gets a really good rap, but actually in many cases diversification can hold you back.
Yeah.
And create risks that you're unaware of.
Yeah.
If you're it's slightly different with indexing and beta, and as time goes on, we see, okay, well, beta should be free. And it is free in many places. In New Zealand, it's not free. And many institutions may masquerade as being active, but actually perhaps they're just passive, and it's actually beta.
Yeah. This is where, Charlie, you are so cool to listen to, because globally, there are a lot of patterns here, aren't there? And if you think about the big incumbents and the way they operate in New Zealand versus the rest of the world, there's interesting anomalies. And like you're saying, active, passive management and kind of philosophies there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity to disrupt.
Well, there's huge margin. And I've talked about it a bit previously, but we are in the most expensive country in the world to consume financial products across the board.
Yeah.
From any area of the industry that you can think of. Which often people don't think of like certain things as financial products as well, right? You don't the general consumer doesn't really think too much about insurance when they're subscribing for insurance, but actually that is a great example of a financial product that they're consuming. Buy now, pay later as well, obviously.
Well, and protecting your core again, that concept, right?
So it's great. It's an amazing opportunity to explore this area. It got me interested into it, and in a big way driven by, I guess, the dynamics here, but actually overseas as well. I think that there's lots of opportunity in general. Like diversification is kind of like, I could run 3 startups at once, but I probably wouldn't do any.
Probably not protecting your core.
Yeah, probably not protecting my core by doing that.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit the same with assets as well. Like for the average investor, how are you going to have 500 good ideas? And how are you really going to be able to manage what's going on in that situation?
Yeah.
And indexes are different.
Well, and measuring success, right? As a product executive and building products and launching to market, you need to see those experiments through and make sure you've defined what good looks like. Remember that North Star and what you're building for. You need to actually measure that you're getting there, because if you're not, you need to adjust and pivot, and maybe you need to try 3 versions of getting there and then double down on the one that works. And you need to do that constantly with your portfolio management, don't you?
Yeah, and actually I think that's where Acuity is going to really change the market, not just here but globally, because we're broker agnostic, so we actually allow other people to connect to us.
Yeah.
And run the execution through a different institution. And I think that the entry level brokers have done a really good job of being okay, here's access, right? Access is really important. Democratization of access is really important, and we still got a long way to go here in Australia.
Jerseys and Hatch have done a great job.
Exactly.
And we've got the Robin Hoods in the US,
and so, here's a stock.
Knowledge is power, right?
Yeah, here's a stock, and you can transact, and there may be a buyer on the other side, and by the way, there may not be. And I think where we are really focused on is how do you actually help people understand that there's a way of building a portfolio. And how do you build product around actually what does the sum of the parts mean?
That's right.
So that's what I'm quite passionate about. And when you do, and I run risk, as well. It's a big part of my life is running our book, and position sizing is it's mostly position sizing that gets you in trouble, more so than other stuff.
Because you bite off more than you can chew. You can't carry the risk.
Or not enough.
or not
enough in some cases, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, position sizing is such an important thing, and for us, we think about that a lot.
Yeah.
We think about the sum of the parts a lot, and that, like you say, you can build in a portfolio a core that has less volatility. But if you have that strength, then you are, and you should be able to go and look for nonlinear returns, because that's the easiest, not the easiest way, probably the hardest way, but at the same time the easiest way to build wealth is through a business that you own and that you have ownership in.
Yep. If you're in the driving seat,
yes.
and you can make quick, nimble decision making. Because like you just said, building wealth in a linear way actually isn't the best strategy at all times. You need that kind of being able to seize opportunities that present themselves that you didn't see, yesterday or the day before.
Totally.
Yeah, so having all the information at your fingertips in real time so you can make decisions,
Yeah. Yes. Decisions while trying not to get decision fatigue.
True.
Which is
where automation comes in. Setting a strategy that then automates and reinvests.
Yeah, setting a strategy is relatively straightforward sometimes. And then what we find as well, and what we've tried to optimize for personally, is execution.
Yeah.
Right?
Execution is everything.
Execution is everything.
You can have 500 amazing ideas, but if you can't execute, it's not worth it.
Yeah, for sure. So it's always good to see a way to build a more systematic approach so that you're not so blindsided in life.
Yeah. That's again back to that core concept. It's a good way of protecting your core, and that systematic approach is like an operating manual or a playbook.
Yes.
That you can refer back to and tweak as you learn more and get more and more sophisticated. I love our topics always, Charlie. We cover all bases, and it's so T-shaped. It's not always finance. It's about everything outside. And money is kind of the currency of life in some ways, but it's not everything. So it's really nice to be able to compare it to life stories and where you come from and your roots. And I love to talk about the soil and farming, and how you manage your asset on farm is pretty exciting and impactful. So I love these overlaps.
It's such an organism, right? And and potentially very productive asset, not necessarily like a property.
When the right decisions are made. That's right.
And actually, I haven't really thought too much about kind of farming, but you have this real asset.
Yeah.
It's an asset heavy kind of arena.
You're a steward.
Yeah,
of
it's really
the land.
kind of fun.
It's very important, and great. Pride comes with it, and respect, and history too. So it's a lot like the incumbents and managing wealth too. Making sure that you're protecting your core, but you also have a lot of optionality built into your strategy. And
well, it's anything we always say, your business, your household, your government. All of it's a living organism.
That's right.
And that's
biomimicry. That's one of the exciting edge investments.
True. Yeah.
And what's the other one? Exposomics. Wow, that's another podcast too.
Right.
That's the impact of climate on human health.
Okay.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Apple's investing in quite a bit AI and some of those preventative measures that help remind you, like you've probably noticed they warn you about sleep. They say it's time to go to sleep. And of course the Apple Watch has been wonderful for fitness and health. But further to that, in farming, we're talking about nutraceuticals actually, and the quality of the milk powder that comes out, or the milk product. If a cow is stressed, during milking,
Totally.
a lot of farmers are actually going back to one milking cycle because the product actually has much better qualities. And as our technology is getting more and more sophisticated, some of those negative impacts or unintended consequences actually, have some carcinogens in them and create problems health-wise. And so, yeah, protecting your core is important health-wise too.
Totally.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to someone who's starting out on their financial journey?
Oh, I love this question.
Their wealth journey,
Yeah.
not necessarily just financial.
Well, I think make sure you're in the driving seat. Do not be at the mercy of constant change and volatility, because that is the reality of the world we're in right now. I mean, everything's constantly changing and evolving, and so having those cornerstones or touch points for decision making are really important. So again, make your strategy, come up with what plan it is. What is it? Failing to plan is planning to fail, right? So really be clear and intentional about what you want and what you need, and just build that plan to get there. It will never be predictable. You'll have surprises, you'll have upset, but at least you're in the driving seat and you can make a better decision at that time with more information. So that's my advice in not a nutshell.
No, awesome. Thank you so much.
So great.
Yeah,
Nice
thank
to
you for
see
coming and
Yeah.
having a chat with us. Really appreciate it.
I'll have
for
to get you down on the farm in the Wairarapa.
Oh, totally would.
Yeah.
Totally would.
Let's do that.
I'd wear different shoes.
No, all birds. Oh, no, not today.
Thanks, everyone.